up, guys? Alex Scott here with jamplay.com, and welcome back to Bass Guitar 101. We are clear in week 8, which is kind of crazy. This is 2 months we have been doing the 101 course here, so if you guys are just tuning in for the first time, welcome to the course. If you guys have been here week after week, definitely appreciate it, and welcome back. We have been clipping right along with all kinds of different fun stuff. In the last couple of weeks here, we've sort of moved away from kind of the first half of the course. We were talking a lot about kind of some basic theory stuff with scales and triads and chords, and looking at kind of chord progressions and stuff like that. And then the last couple of weeks, we have been looking a little bit more at different types of bass lines. In particular, last week we were talking about walking bass lines, right? Which are bass lines that sort of are consistent quarter notes, but each time the note changes, and the notes often move through and sort of outline the chord progression of the song that you're playing. So yeah, last week we did sort of like a jazz kind of a thing, and we had a really cool walking bass line that moved through 12-bar blues, and so we learned that kind of standard progression. So that's one idea when it comes to kind of standard bass lines. And of the three, which I kind of look at there being three general types of bass lines: the walking bass line, the pedal, which is what we're going to be talking about this week, and then riffs, right? So walking line, as I was just saying, quarter notes moving around, typically using triads or scales and stuff to sort of outline the chord tones. This week we're moving into talking about a pedaling bass line, which its name kind of comes from the idea of how you would pedal a bicycle, right? It's kind of one motion that you do over and over and over again, and so that is very, very much the idea behind a pedaling bass line. Is you kind of just pick your root note, which this week we're going to be in the key of D, okay? So everything's going to be based around our 5th fret A string, and we're going to kind of be moving around in that region. And you pretty much pick your root note of the chord that is happening, and you pedal it. You pretty much just hold down that one note. So the exercise that we're going to be doing this week is actually really, really simple. But it's also kind of exciting because this is the first time that we're going to be using 8th notes, okay? So we started with whole and half notes, which obviously when you're talking about a bar or a measure, it gets 4 counts. Whole note being you hold the note for all 4 counts, half note 2 counts, and then we've been working through some quarter notes, which are just 1 count, so you get 4 notes in 1 bar with a quarter note. This week, since we're doing the pedaling thing and we're not going to be playing lots of different notes, and instead we're just going to be focusing on the root note of the chord, we are going to be doing 8th notes, okay? Now, an 8th note, as you can probably guess from the name, is half as long as a quarter note. So a quarter note gets 2 8th notes. 2 8th notes make a quarter note. So it can be inferred 8 8th notes comprise a bar. So we're moving up the speed a little bit here. We're going to be, picking our notes a little bit faster than we're used to, but that's sort of offset by the fact that we're not really moving a whole lot with our left hand. We're just playing this very simple pedaling pattern. So, it should be a very, very fun one. So let's go ahead and pull up the notation here on screen, and as you can see, it looks like there's a lot of notes, but it's pretty straightforward here. We're just moving a couple of times with the left hand, moving between all these different, not all these, but these couple of different notes. So, like I said, we're starting off 5th fret on our D string, okay? And we're just going to be pedaling that note. We're going to play it 8 times, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then we're going to move down to our 3rd fret on the A string, which we're going to play 8 times again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then we're going to move down to our 2nd fret on the A string, which is our B. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we're going to jump down to our E string and our first fret, which is going to be an F note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we're going to move back up and start the whole thing over. The backing track that we're going to be playing along with is pretty cool. It's got a ripping guitar solo over the whole thing. And the kind of emphasis that I wanted to put on this one is really laying back and kind of getting our brains away from worrying as much about kind of being here and focused on everything that's going on, with the walking lines and with the triads and stuff. You're thinking a lot, you're doing a lot of different stuff. So this exercise is, first and foremost to talk about the pedaling line and this idea of just picking your root note and really just kind of driving that root note home. Secondarily, it's to get us into playing eighth notes. But then also it's really to just illustrate this concept of really listening to the other things that are going on around you, like when you're playing with a group of musicians. I mean, in this case, it's a backing track, but the same idea still applies. In the backing track, we've got drums, there's an organ part, and then there's this guitar solo. So what I want you guys to be focused on when we get in a little bit here to playing along with the track is really thinking about just listening and listening to the rest of the band, listening to what the different parts are that are going on, what the drums are doing, what the organ part is doing, what the guitar solo sounds like. Because one of our most important skills as bass players, especially when we're working in a group of other musicians, is the ability to listen to what everybody else is doing and adapt what we're playing to best fit the situation, best fit kind of the vibe of what everybody else is doing. And that really gets to the core of kind of the role of this instrument in a band. And it's, again, like I've said a number of times through this whole course, we're not up front, we're not flashy, we're not the focus of attention, we're not, people pretty seldomly in the audience are really paying attention to the bass player. But the idea is that we glue everything together. We kind of sit in the back and we provide this foundation, this link between the drums and everything else that's going on in the band, because we have the rhythmic aspect of what we do, and then we also have the harmonic or melodic element of what we do, where we're locking in with the drums in a rhythmic sense, but then the notes that we choose to play are outlining or reinforcing the chords that are going on everywhere else. And so the ability to listen to the rest of the band and play stuff that really is going to fit and is going to vibe and kind of jive well with what everybody else is doing, and sort of change it up as we're going along based on what other people are doing. This is a really, really critical part of being a good bass player, especially in like a rock or pop context. So that's kind of a big focus of this lesson today. Now, another thing that I wanted to talk about for a little bit is just a little bit of kind of the history of how this whole idea of a pedaling bass line came about. Because as the walking bass line that we were doing last week, right, came out of a lot of jazz. Because in jazz, especially in what you would call like combo jazz, or bebop, basically any situation where it wasn't like a big band where you had all of these horns and strings, you had 20 or 30 people oftentimes in a big band. I'm speaking more to like later jazz, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, that kind of stuff, where they were small combos. So you would have a trumpet, piano, bass, drums, maybe a saxophone, 3, 4, maybe 5 guys, maybe even 6, but even that was getting a little large. The role of the bass in that, and this is where the walking bass line came out of, was the bass player was a pretty fundamental part of what was going on, because they would, in a jazz song, they would state what they call the head, which is the melody of the song, and everybody would kind of play the melody together, and then the bass line would play a simpler walking line. But then, if you guys have ever listened to jazz before, most of the tune are the solos. So the drummer lays back and he's just swinging, piano player might be playing little chords and just kind of comping here and there. And then the bass player is really driving the bus. You know, he's really playing around a lot. He's emphasizing he's kind of the primary person who's outlining all the chords and saying, okay, here's where the G is, say, if they're in the key of G, and then here's a C, and then here's a D, whatever the chords are. That was mainly the bass player's job. So you had these bass lines that really kind of went all over the place because he had to cover a lot of ground to really outline sort of the tones and the sounds of all the chords that were happening. So that's where the walking line came out of. As you move more into rock and roll, so now we're talking, jazz of the late 40s, early 50s, moving into like rockabilly, and then ultimately into what we now think of as like real classic rock and roll in the early to mid 60s. The Beatles, Rolling Stones, all that kind of stuff. You now had these songs where there weren't really as many solos. I mean, there certainly were in certain circumstances, but generally speaking, the songs were about the lyrics. The songs were not about focus on the instruments. The instruments were all, instead of the bass player being the bed and then the instruments sort of, whether it was guitar or piano or trumpet or whatever, shining out on top and playing these solos, you had the lyrics were sitting on top, and they were really the focus, and then the entire band was really laying back to kind of support that and create a framework for the lyrics to work around. So that was a really, really big shift in modern music, and that is where you see a lot of bass shifting away from this idea of the walking line and shifting into this idea of a pedaling line, because suddenly there basically just wasn't as much space in the music. There wasn't as much room, so to speak, because, instead of a guitar player kind of playing maybe little chords here and there and then playing a solo, as you would have in jazz, suddenly the guitar players he's also kind of playing a big pedaling line, and it's going for the entire duration of the song, where you get rhythm guitar parts from. So that's, in the context of a band, somebody doing something like this is really taking up a lot of room, sonically speaking. It's a constant sound. It's a pretty big sound because it's an electric guitar. So when you start to have that, and then maybe a piano player doing a similar kind of a thing, and a drummer, much bigger, louder patterns, a lot more snare drum, more hi-hats and stuff, as opposed to jazz. It's very quiet, very gentle. There's not, there might be more notes going on, but the dynamic, the volume is much lower. You move into this rock stuff, and suddenly the drummer's driving, the guitar player is driving, the piano player is driving. Well, a walking bass line doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in that context anymore, because there's so much other stuff going on, and it's all just this big kind of these focused parts based around sitting under lyrics, so that the whole band is kind of getting out of the way, and you can hear what the singer's saying, and whether they're trying to tell a story or whatever the lyrics are representing. That was the focus. That was what needed to sort of sit on top and kind of shine out over everything else. So that is kind of where this idea of a pedaling bass line came from, which is, it's always interested me because walking bass lines are much more complex than pedaling bass lines. And it's always interesting to see times in history when things have actually gotten simpler as time has gone on. Because usually, if you look at like technology or inventions or anything like that, stuff gets more complex and gets more advanced as you go on. But bass players have, in a lot of ways, gotten a lot more simple the more time has gone on. And even nowadays, in a lot of pop music nowadays that you hear on the radio, the bass player's barely doing anything. The bass player's just sitting there going. There's not even any pedaling going on anymore. They're just playing one or two notes a lot of the time. So it's just interesting to see it start in this very complicated space with jazz and with the walking lines, and sort of simplify into pedaling lines. And then as time has gone on, bass as like a backing instrument has arguably gotten simpler and simpler and simpler. So kind of an interesting history tidbit. But anyways, kind of a big digression, but I thought that would be kind of interesting for you guys. So let's go ahead, let's take a look at our notation here one more time and kind of keep looking at this pedaling line. So what I'll go ahead and do is pull up a metronome. We'll set it to 80 beats per minute, and you guys can grab your basses, and or you can of course just watch it and follow along if you would like. And we're going to kind of just play through this first with the metronome and just really focus on the sound and getting our eighth notes nice and even and consistent and in time. Because that's going to be the first challenge as we sort of ramp up our finger speed with our right hand, is really getting the notes very consistent as far as duration goes, as far as timing and spacing goes. So let me grab my metronome here. There we go. Alrighty. So yeah, we got our metronome running. So I'm just going to kind of play through this, and you guys can join in with me there at home. And we just really want to be focusing on, like I was just saying, our spacing, really making sure that our right hand, each note, bop, 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 is really, really consistent. And I kind of call this the idea of a grid. A time grid or something, I guess you could call it. But yeah, just making sure that it's really, really tight, that all the notes are evenly spaced, that everything sounds clean, the volumes of each note are the same. So here we go. We'll just jump right in here. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Really concentrate. Make sure that right hand is nice and consistent. You don't want certain notes to be sticking out. You don't want certain notes longer or shorter than others. And you want to make sure that the transition from each note to the next note is nice and clean. No buzz, no slop. You want to pay attention to whether you're rushing or dragging time-wise, that is speeding up or slowing down. You want to use that metronome to help you make sure that all your notes are nice and consistent. So that's really the main idea here is just this idea of consistency, this idea of a grid, where everything is really nice and lined up. And one technique that has helped me over the years when practicing and playing with the metronome has actually been to almost dance a little bit. And this sounds silly, I know, but good natural time kind of comes from within. It's definitely something that you feel as opposed to something that you kind of learn or you think about. And the easiest way to sort of approach that feel and get it going for yourself is just to dance. And I will totally admit, and I think all musicians should do this at some point, to having just danced like a madman, either to some of my favorite music or sometimes even just to a metronome, on my own when I was practicing or what have you, because that's, our whole goal a lot of the time, especially with rock music or funk or blues or whatever, people are dancing and people love to dance. And the best way to create a feel with your music that's going to make people want to dance is if it makes you want to dance. And the best way to learn how to make music makes you want to dance is to dance while you're playing music. I know it seems redundant, but just trust me on this. So if you're practicing, even if it's just with a metronome, it can really make all the difference in the world to get a little head bang going on, kind of a thing, or a side to side, or tapping your foot is always really good. I'm always tapping my foot, but yeah, just moving your body a little bit with the pulse of the music can really do a lot to help your feel develop and help make everything feel very, very nice and danceable. So all of that in mind, let's go ahead. I'm going to pull up the backing track. We got it at 80 beats per minute right now. And in a moment here, after we do this backing track at this slower speed, we're going to move into our Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, whether it's stuff specifically about this lesson or just really anything in general, I was talking a little bit about history earlier. If you guys have any questions about the history of music or questions about some of the technique stuff, questions about gear, I always like to leave a good amount of time at the end of these live sessions with you guys to kind of have our back and forth dialogue. So if you guys are curious about anything at all having anything to do with music, please go stick it over in the good old chat box. And Captain Chris is here with me. He will get it up on the screen, and we'll kind of do the two-way thing. So while y'all are thinking about that, I'm going to go ahead pull up our backing track here. You guys can follow along or play along, whatever suits you guys. And we also do have, if you're a JamPlay member, we have the guided practice for this whole course over on the website. So you can log on and you can kind of recap what we're talking about today and kind of go over it again. And then when we have some sort of speed-based challenges where we play the exercises together at a slow and then at a medium and then finally at a fast tempo. So yeah, I'm going to pull up the slow tempo backing track here. We've got the notation on screen, and we will go ahead and play along, see how it sounds. And again, while I'm doing this, get those questions over there in the old chat box, and we'll get it happening. So here we go. And 1, 2, 3. There you go. There is our track for today. Now, I'm sure you guys probably noticed a little bit. I was trying to move a little bit, move my head, move my body, and kind of dance along. And again, this really gets into this idea of feel and groove that we're talking about when it comes to this kind of grid idea of keeping everything in time. There's one thing to kind of play it robotically, and where, yes, it is perfectly in time and everything's evenly spaced, but it doesn't have any soul or any emotion behind it. And getting your body moving a little bit can definitely help with kind of bringing some feel and some soul into the scope of the whole thing. So that's the track for today. Again, it's all available on the site, along with the guided practice stuff. The notation is also up there, so you guys can go over, and there's 3 different tempos that this backing track is at. So as your fingers get accustomed to this slowest tempo, you can sort of ramp it up. That was at 80 beats per minute. You can ramp it up. There's 100 beat per minute example, and then there is a 120, the fast version. So you can kind of work your fingers up to being able to really crank out some eighth notes there. So yeah, that's kind of our pedaling idea for the day. So we can go ahead and take a peek. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we do have a few questions coming
Excellent.
in. Good participation tonight.
Excellent.
Today.
Thank you, guys.
First one is from CT Guitar.
Hi. Good to see you again, buddy.
And first off, he's liking the Marcus Miller bass today. His question is, at the 3rd bar, G over B, could the bass experiment by playing G instead of B?
First of all, CT Guitar, good eye. I am using a different bass today because I just wrapped up doing some filming for the guided practice for the upcoming Funk It Up course. And I think it was you and I that were talking last week about some slap techniques and stuff. So that is all coming your way with the Funk It Up course, and this is the bass I will be doing that course on, because it has a bit of the funkier, jazzier tone. As far as your question goes, yes, absolutely. You can definitely do that, and that's also a very good eye for looking at the chart there. For any of you guys who didn't fully understand what G over B meant, if we think back to when we're doing our triads, right? If we're in the key of G and we start going up our G major scale, we have a G, A, B. B is our third, our major third when we're in the key of G. Okay? So when you say G over B, it's kind of a guitar idea that you can also definitely apply to bass, where you have a G major chord, G major triad, but it's being played over a B. So you have these, this would be your G major chord could be up here. I'm just speaking like pitch-wise. And then instead of putting your B there, your bass note, the lowest note of your chord, is like this. So you've got, it's still a G major chord, but you've just sort of taken the notes and put them slightly out of order. So yes, CT Guitar, you can absolutely play a G there, and that will kind of change up the tonality of the whole exercise, because instead of having this nice descending thing, it would sort of move it more down into being that almost a more like rock kind of a thing, which, I mean, it's already kind of rocky, but it's a little, having a straight descending thing or putting that third in the bass with that G over B chord is a little bit lighter. I mean, I wouldn't say jazzier necessarily, but sort of more in that vein, whereas plowing that G down to that F is going to make it sound a little bit edgier. Could be a good word for it, but yeah, awesome observation. Can't talk. And yeah, you're totally spot on. You could definitely play a G under that and experiment with that kind of a sound. So yeah, thank you very much for the question. Excellent question.
All right, next one is from RBA 2124. And the question is there an upper limit as to how fast we should practice or play the practice lines?
Greetings again, RBA. Welcome back. And I would say no. If you want to set up a metronome and you want to go at 200 BPM, which just for kicks, let's see if I can even do that. Hang on 1 second here. Oh. definitely do that if you wanted to. If you want to work it up to that fast, there's never anything wrong with that, especially if you are into faster music styles. So, like punk music or hard rock can get really fast. Metal can get really fast. There's certainly like blues. You don't really see super high tempo blues usually. Jazz. I don't know if I said jazz already, but yeah. So if you like faster styles of music and that's something that you want to work towards being able to do, or you want to be able to, get into some soloing stuff. Where you're playing really, really fast lines, or like funk. There's a lot of really fast lines in funk. Then yeah, upping those tempos even beyond what I have the tracks at could be very, very beneficial for you. There isn't, since this is more of a beginner geared course, I didn't do backing tracks at those really fast tempos, kind of for the reason of it being more beginner. But if you guys go, I know that there is a couple of really up-tempo tracks. Like if you're a Jam Play member, you can go check out my intermediate bass course, my intermediate bass concepts course, which I think is coming live on the site as we speak. I know that there's some faster, kind of more punk, hard rock, post-punk style tracks in there. I definitely just did, for any of you guys who tuned in on July 5th to our live giveaway event, we have some new jam track packs. One of them, which I did, is called Flavors of Rock, and there is a couple of like kind of punk, hardcore tracks in there that are at faster tempos. So if you're looking at for stuff specifically to be able to play faster, there's a couple good resources. But in general, yeah, any of the exercise that we're learning here in BG 101, you could take those and just set your metronome to progressively faster tempos and work your fingers up. So if that's something you're interested in being able to do, definitely go for it. No harm will come of it, that's for sure. So, great question. Thank you.
All right, next one is from T. Lorps.
Indeed.
Is metronome practice the best way to practice keeping time, or are there other methods that are helpful?
When you're on your own, yes, 1000%. The metronome is definitely the best way to go. Playing along with CDs and music that you enjoy is really good too. But what you'll find is that a lot of the time, even when they're in the recording studio, they were recording to a metronome. And there are certainly lots of, like, not a lot of bands use a metronome when they're playing live gigs. It's not like if I'm out playing a show, it's not like I have a click in my ear, in headphones or something like that. If you have really good musicians around you that you have the opportunity to play with, particularly really good drummers, I'm not to like disparage anybody's friends or whatever, but I'm talking about guys who are pro and out and gigging a lot. If you have that kind of those kinds of friends or those kinds of guys around and you have the opportunity to play with them, that can be really good, just because it gets you used to kind of what I was talking about earlier, where you're listening to the rest of the band and you're really listening to the drummer and trying to follow along with what they're doing. But they do have to be a very, very solid pro quality drummer, because if they're not and their time is shaky, then the more you practice with them, the more you'll kind of adopt their shaky time. But a metronome, on the other hand, is a mechanical device. It will keep you true every single time, no matter what. It will absolutely keep you locked in 100%, and it can't fail. And so when you're playing with a metronome, if you get off from it, you know that it's you, and it's not the metronome. Because, again, it's a mechanical device, especially like with the apps on your cell phone. It's digital. It basically can't screw up. So you know that anytime you make a mistake, it really is your mistake, and you know where to correct and how to correct, and you can say, okay, well, I was dragging a little bit, slowing down a little bit, or rushing, speeding up a little bit, and you can get a really, really good idea of and feel for where your natural time sits, and whether you have a tendency to rush or a tendency to drag. I don't know if anybody else would ever necessarily take it to this extreme. But when I was a lot younger, and I think I was 13 or 14 when I did this, and I just started playing bass. But one of my bass instructors was just talking about the importance of a metronome and how important it is to developing good time. And so I did a little experiment where I wandered around for an entire day with a click at 120 BPM in my ear. And to this day, I can still count out 120 almost perfectly when asked to. I can get within a couple beats of it just because I spent an entire day listening. It's right about there. An entire day listening to just that tempo. So I'm not necessarily recommending you go that extreme with it. That was kind of a nerdy thing that I did. But basically, yeah, metronomes are invaluable. And they are definitely, I would say, the best way to develop your own sense of time, especially if you're mostly practicing on your own. And just so you know, all the backing tracks that I've done for any of my courses on Jamplay, whether it's this one or any of the on-demand stuff that we have on the site, the bass concept stuff, has all been tracked to a click. So it is all, I mean, it is as good as a metronome, basically, because it is tracked to that perfect grid of time. So definitely keep playing with metronome. Always, always, always metronome. I still, after 15 years, I still play with metronome all the time. So excellent question, though. Very, very good question.
Okay, we've got a couple of general questions. Did you want
Okay.
to take those now, or
Yeah.
would you like to? Okay.
No, yeah.
We'll do that. All right, this one is from Boondock Saint 408,
Boondock.
and Boondock says, "I pay attention to the bass player. The bass player of a jazz trio I listened to this past weekend sounded great on his upright bass. Can an electric bass approximate the sound qualities of an upright bass? What about putting some foam at the bridge?"
Greetings again, Boondock. Always good to see you, brother. And what is really funny about your question is the original jazz bass that in 63, I think, is when Leo Fender released the very first jazz bass, had a bridge that covered the whole thing and had a big piece of foam in it that pressed against the strings specifically to do exactly what you're talking about, and that is to approximate the sound of an upright. You can still buy reissue jazz basses and basses from a couple of custom companies that have that exact feature. It's a big silver chrome bridge that covers this whole thing. You don't see the ends of the strings or anything. It covers this whole thing, and there's a piece of foam inside, and even some of the old ones had a knob, and you could raise and lower the foam. But what it does is just mutes the string. Yeah, there we go. I prefer to do it like what I was just doing, which is I take my palm, I butt it up against the strings. It can be kind of hard to do with G string, especially with the shape. Here, how can I illustrate that? The shape of this part of your hand, like mine's a little bit curved, and there's a little kind of divot right there, so it can be a little tricky to get all the strings perfectly. But like I can very easily get E, A, and D strings. And then I just play with a bit more of this kind of attack as opposed to what we're used to. I'll use my thumb. And that can get close. Obviously, the upright is such a specific instrument and such a specific sound because of physically what it is. And it's got this massive hollow body, and it's, there's almost no metal anywhere on the entire thing, and it's fretless, and it's got a rounded fretboard, a radius, have very, very radiused fretboard. The strings are kind of arc around. And it's got this big wooden bridge. Like, just what it is what really makes that sound. But that is definitely, you can do that to kind of get that kind of a vibe going on. And you hear that on a lot of records. You hear that in reggae a lot. You hear it in jazz a lot. R&B, Motown, that was a really popular technique. One of my favorite examples of the usage of that technique. So yeah, you basically, and kind of a poor man's quote unquote version of that would be, yes, you could definitely get a block of foam and just sort of stick it down underneath the strings if you wanted your bass to sound like that all the time. I just find that kind of limits what else the bass can do. And if you're constantly having to get, if you're going from wanting that sound to not wanting it because you're going to play some rock and roll or something like that, getting down in there and kind of removing it and pulling it out each and every time, and then invariably the foam will start to fall apart. And there's if you really love the sound, then I would do something like that. But I would, if it's just something you want to explore, I would just try using this idea where side of your hand, and then use your thumb and just your index finger and work on this kind of a picking. And you can take all the exercises that we've done here in this course or any other stuff you're doing with the bass and play them that way, like today's. Could be played with that kind of a technique. So, but yeah, you're spot on. And yeah, it's kind of funny because that was actually the original jazz bass was invented to do exactly what you're talking about. So, great question and great idea.
Okay, next one is from Gelpack. And
Indeed, hello, Gelpack.
The question is, what can I do to minimize the excessive popping sound on my bass? I tend to attack the strings really hard.
Excellent question. And I don't know if you're going to like the answer. Because generally, even if we're playing really aggressive styles of music, we still want to be as relaxed as possible, and we want to think of the phrase conservation of momentum, okay? That's big words and kind of sciencey, I know, but the idea is that if you let all of your other tools, your amplifier and your instrument, if you let that stuff do a lot of the work for you, it's going to be better on your hands, it's going to prolong your playing career, it's going to prolong the life of your instrument. I'm assuming what you're referring to is I actually have the pickups on this bass very low so that exactly what you're talking about doesn't really happen, but that sound. The sound you get when your string directly contacts the magnetic poles on your pickup. You've got these little magnets here, and if the string itself touches, you guys can hear that directly on the feed coming from my bass. That's probably the popping sound that you're talking about, and that does mean that you're generally playing your strings a little bit too hard. One thing you can do to minimize that is check your pickup height. If we go over to a different camera here, you guys can see I have a fair amount of space in between my strings in this pickup here. So you can see there's a good amount of give. But conversely, kind of do it from this angle here, you can see on the other one, there is not as much room. So on my neck pickup on this bass, I have a lot of room, but on my bridge pickup, I have less. So that is one thing you can do to kind of mitigate it a little bit and make it so that it's not as big of an issue. But I would also just recommend, if you find yourself being aware that you're attacking the strings really hard, even if I'm playing punk, I'm still right there. I never play like that out, even if I'm playing really aggressive music, because it tires your hands out. It doesn't sound as good as it could. It has the tendency to clip and distort. And if you're in a situation where you find yourself attacking the strings really hard because you feel that you're too quiet, always just turn your amp up before you start playing harder. Because again, conservation of momentum is that's my whole thing with this, is the less work you can do, the more you can conserve the momentum of your fingers. And then turn up elsewhere, turn up your amplifier, you're going to be able to play for longer. Your hands are going to be more relaxed. Your muscles are going to be more relaxed. You're going to have more stamina. Your tone is going to be a lot better. You're going to have a lot more finesse and control. Because if I need to play, if I'm playing really hard and attacking the strings really hard, there comes a point where it just kind of farts out. It muds out. Whereas I can get the same volume by just turning my amp up 2 clicks and then. So it's going to allow you to play faster. It's going to allow you to play longer. So I check your pickup height, and if your pickup's like right on your strings, then that's not good, and that can cause that problem. But in general, if you know that you're attacking your strings hard, I would focus on turning up so that you don't have to, and then focus on playing relaxed and using it as little energy as possible, I guess. So excellent question, though. Very good question.
All right, and the next one is also from Gelpack.
Indeed.
And the question is, how do you know what to play when soloing on bass?
Also a very good question. Let me see if I can find a way to summarize this in a few short moments. I have a whole, I have an advanced bass concepts course that covers soloing. That has a couple of lessons actually covering soloing and improvisation that will be on the site very soon. So I would direct you to that before trying, because there's just so much that you can go into when it comes to soloing and improvising and that kind of stuff. But to simplify it greatly, the way that I think about it is you have riffs and licks. I'll explain all this in a second. You have riffs and licks, and then you have phrases and ideas. Okay? So a riff, like you guys, because I've played a couple examples of really fast playing. That's a lick. I'm not thinking when I play that. That's just a learned pattern that I figured out years ago that I think sounds cool. So that's a lick that I have that I can pull out of my sleeve in the middle of a solo, and I can just go, and it just kind of comes out, and I can play it in time, and I've practiced it a bunch, but it's learned muscle memory. So that's or. Those are all slap licks. I'm not thinking A hammer on E, A hammer on C sharp, A hammer on D, A hammer on D sharp. I'm not thinking all that stuff. It's just a learned muscle memory thing that you can pull out. So that's lick, or a riff, you could call it. On the other hand are phrases. I have probably never played all those notes in that order before because I was thinking a lot more about, okay, E minor. I know my E minor scale. And I know where all those notes lie. So I'm going to try to find a new series of patterns that I'm thinking actively about the shape of the scale under my fingers and how I can make a triad. How I can make jumps, how I can find new ways to connect those notes. So really, soloing to me, and kind of knowing what to play, especially when you're improvising, is about combining licks and combining phrases. And your licks kind of serve the flash element, and your phrases serve the creative element. And I actually bring them together by singing. So, here, you know what? Let me just do this for you, and maybe you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Let me set up a click here. Oh, come on. We'll set it up at 120 BPM. Why not? And this isn't like something for you guys to replicate because it's going to be kind of complicated, but let's say I want to play lick, phrase, lick, phrase. So I can do that. like that, when I'm doing that, I'm thinking lick, learned thing, I can just kind of regurgitate. And then I move into a phrase, and what helps me phrase is by singing it. And, I mean, I've done it a lot, so I've kind of gotten used to it. But anybody, almost anybody, even people without musical experience, can sing a random melody. Anybody can just hum something. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. And that's improvisation. Whether or not people realize that they're doing it or not, they're creating a new melody off the top of their head. So when I'm... I know my singing is terrible and I'm not singing the pitches, but I'm thinking them in my head and I'm using my mouth to express them, which kind of pulls me through ideas and kind of gives me a base to go on. So I move from licks into kind of singing a little thing, and then I'll move into a different lick, and then move into singing something, I guess. It's kind of my hyper-abridged 4-minute, here's how you improvise a solo thing. But like I said, there's my Advanced Bass Concepts course will be up on the site pretty soon, and there are a whole dedicated, I think, 2 or 3 straight lessons. Probably an hour long, that it just covers exclusively improvisation. And there's actually going to be some improvisation and solo stuff at the end of the Funk It Up course that we have upcoming. So if you want to tune into that, we'll learn a lot of really cool playing techniques. And then in the last couple of weeks, the last 3 weeks actually, we talk a lot about soloing and improvising. And there's some backing tracks that I have that have space for solos. So. Long-winded explanation, I know, but it's a big topic, and yeah, I hope that was helpful. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate the question. It's an excellent question.
Okay, that's all the questions we have for now.
Okay.
Just want to remind everybody, if during the week, if you're practicing and you think of something, a question that you need answered, feel free to type it in on the forum. There is a thread just for this live workshop for this course.
Absolutely, that's a very good point. Yeah, there's if you go onto the Jam Play member forums, and I think even can non-members access the forums, or is it members only?
I think they can. There's a specific link. I'm not sure what it is though.
Okay, we will find a way to get that to you guys. But yeah, anybody can go on there, go on the forums, and there you'll see the general kind of category will be live sessions. And then under there, you'll see Bass Guitar 101. And anything you put in there will go directly to me, and we will get it up. And we can kind of, when we start these question and answer sessions during the live events, we can start off with ones that you guys have asked throughout the week. So we can kind of use that to kick things off. But yeah, go on there and check it out. There's a lot of other great information on the forums as well. So. But I believe that is about time for us today. That was a long one, and you guys, awesome questions. Thank you so much. Definitely keep them coming through these. And we've got 2 weeks left before we're all done. Yeah, this was week 8, so we got 9 and 10. And then you guys will be all graduated. And then shortly thereafter, stay tuned because we'll be starting the Funk It Up course, which is going to be a little bit more advanced. And is going to cover some really fun techniques. And like I said, we're going to get into some slapping and some soloing, improvisation, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, awesome job, guys. Thank you so much for sticking with me. It's so great to see you guys coming back week after week. You know, all my buddies who keep tuning in. I really, really appreciate it, guys. So thank you so much for that. Thank you from everybody here at Jam Play. We couldn't do it without you guys. So, yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Bye.